Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. 2 weeks before the election, we are here with the 57th governor of the great state of Missouri. Governor Parson, thank you for the time.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Scott.
I'm going to start off, you've had an eventful month, but this week started off with a pall. There was a school shooting in St. Louis. When you're governor and you find out one of your constituents has died like that, what goes through your mind?
You know, I think just how much of a tragedy it is for everybody involved. First of all, for me and Teresa, our hearts go out, our prayers go out to the families and all the people that are affected, for the teachers, the students, and everybody in the school system, because it's just, we all have a tendency to think this is always going to happen somewhere else, and we don't ever think it's going to happen here as just everyday people. And then as governor, it's just more of a burden. You're trying to figure out what can we do, how do we prevent these things, were we prepared, and how did that all come about? But I think it's just the idea, it's just such a terrible tragedy that it's not going to be over with. We know what happened yesterday. We all know that. We've reached out to St. Louis, most of the leadership there, the mayor, chief of police, the director of public safety, the school superintendents, legislators, all the things you do on the official side. But I also know from being in law enforcement 20 years and working homicides, this thing's not going to be over with in just a day or two. The effect this will have on the months to come on everybody, we'll have to be prepared for that and do everything we can to help.
The first reports come out show the St. Louis Police Department did it by the book. The resource officer did it by the book. They were pretty successful in limiting the death. But was there something else the state could do?
I don't think there's anything. I think what you got to do is you got to have the faith in the people on the local levels to do the right thing. I think when you look at it, again, from a law enforcement vision, I think they did everything they could do. They had a great response time. They go in there and take the shooter out. This is not a time that you try to negotiate. This is not a time that you want to huddle up and try to figure out a plan. These officers went in there, these men and women went in there doing what they were supposed to be there for, and exactly they had an active shooter, and the one thing they're there to do is protect lives, and they took the shooter out, and that's exactly what they should have did, and I'm glad and proud they reacted the way they did, and glad they took the guy out.
So when these happen, you always hear folks that are pretty consistently believe in gun control. They get a little louder about this time.
Right.
Is that something the state should look at?
I just hate to even start going down the political trail of another gun issue. We've been through this, multiple times, and I know people will try to bring the gun issue up again, which we always have, especially when we're this close to an election. The reality of it is, whether you could live in Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, El Paso, Seattle, Portland, I can name them all, strictest gun laws in America, and they have the worst violent crime ever. And as much of a tragedy this was yesterday, this is happening all the time in St. Louis. The reality of it is people are losing their lives way too often up there. Until we make a dedicated effort to put more police officers on the ground, to prosecute violent criminals, to get them off the streets, put them in prison where they belong. Also on the same token, we talk about mental health all the time. We made the largest investment in mental health we ever have in our state's history, because I firmly believe we got to figure out, more important, how do you prevent these things from happening? And when this all comes about, people are going to look back and this shooter's, what all was going through his mind, what he had been going through. And it's going to be interesting to see what all created this problem as of yesterday, what made him do what he did. But there's going to be a lot more factors than him having a weapon in his hand. And I think you're never going to take violent criminals, you're not going to stop from doing violent acts, no matter what your law, because they're not proving the law when you do it anyhow.
You just wrapped up what has to be a wildly successful special session, maybe the most successful one in recent memory.
Yeah.
Let's talk first about the Ag Bill. So when you said back during session, you maybe mentioned you might veto the Ag Bill. I think some folks thought he'll never veto the Ag Bill, and then you did.
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't mention I was going to. To be right honest about it, I said I was going to veto the Ag Bill. And look, that was one of the most difficult vetoes I had. Now, I've been an ag guy all my life, but you know what? I am not going to let us get caught up in the political process of agriculture in the state of Missouri. I'm going to defend that as much as I will anything, that we're going to be treated the same as any other business or anything. And what happened there at the last part of the session, it just got held up in political maneuvering. And what happened, you're affecting people's lives when you do stuff like that. And the 2 year we couldn't even implement some of the programs. And my biggest fear is if you ever went to the 2 years, you'd be doing that from now on, and you get held up there. Next year, you'd be held up because you got to get the bill done. So the reality of it was, if we couldn't support agriculture, if we couldn't do a tax cut for the people of the state, all of us that are up here, especially for what we believe in up here, then we probably don't belong up here.
You came out and announced special session.
Right.
You had to feel, I think there's not a lot of folks in this town that was confident it would turn out this way outside of maybe the folks working behind us here.
Right.
You come out and announce it. I thought something that was particularly compelling was an Eco-Devo program in St. Louis has 6 years,
Right.
but a farmer in St. Clair County has 2.
Yeah.
There was some fundamental unfairness, but when you dig into it, it felt as though the difference between how session turned out and special session, you really personally met with folks.
I don't think there's any question, and I learned some things through that myself, doing a better job, being a better communicator. But I met with all the senators, talked to the senators most of the time, either talked to them or met with them, a lot of the legislators, because I want them to know exactly why I was doing it, why we had a good plan. Look, we've been working on this thing for months to be able to make sure, one, we could afford to do it in the state of Missouri, make sure we could sustain it for a long period of time, and really have all the pieces into place for the legislators when they did come back. So yeah, I learned a little bit there too. I probably got to do a better job of communicating, and I think it all paid off. At the end of the day, we virtually got exactly what we wanted. It just took a long time to get there.
Did you really think when this started out that ag bill would look that much like what you wanted?
I did. I did actually. I spent a lot of time on that, and I knew part of the ag bill that didn't even get in there. Some of the pieces in there were still important. And I felt like after I got to talking to some of the senators and figuring out how to move forward, I thought there was going to be a good chance we got to put the whole ag bill back together, which we did. And again, there's a lot of people that were involved in that, so there's a lot of senators that deserve credit.
Sure.
As much division as there's been down there, and we all know kind of how those sides shake out.
How did that go into your thinking? I mean, there's been some division, I guess, upstairs here. Right. Were you a little worried that division might lock up your special session?
You know, I really wasn't. Again, it's why we did all the work before we did the special session. I pretty well knew where everybody was, coming in there where I believed everybody was at. And I just thought if we stayed to the points of the special session, if I stayed to the facts of what I told them I was going to do, and we stayed in these parameters, we could figure out a way to get it done. And that's exactly what happened at the end of the day. So a lot of people deserve credit for it. I mean, and like I said, I don't know that any one person deserves any more credit than anybody else. I talked to multiple senators and just tried to put a plan into place together, and we executed it.
Does it worry you just a little bit? I mean, I think Dean Plocker had some knuckles attached to some of those votes there at the end. A state with a supermajority of Republicans, where a supermajority of that party is made up of rural folks, seems like it was awful hard to pass an ag bill.
Well, again, I think when you get up here in this arena, a lot of things come into play in the politics. But I think when people do calm down, and I think Dean, for example, when he got engaged in that, was a help, especially in the committee process of it. It's unfortunate sometimes because of political votes in committees that people all of a sudden get a little nervous about a vote. Voting something out of a committee and getting it on the floor is just giving an opportunity for everybody to have a say in it. And it's not whether you're saying you agree with it or you disagree with it. You're really wanting to move the process forward. And I really felt like it was something that should get on the floor and have that discussion. Disappointed in a lot of people that tried to play politics with it and voted against it in the House. When it left the House, it had 131 votes in regular session. Very few people were against it. And all of a sudden, I was disappointed in a lot of people I know on the other side of the aisle that I had worked with my entire career, and all of a sudden they thought they had a chance to make the governor look bad because he's going to lose. And I was disappointed in that. But anyhow, that's part of the arena we're in.
You know, I'm just a simple hillbilly from West Butler County, but sometimes I wish rural Missouri folks could elect legislators that care as much about rural Missouri as Dean Plocker does from town and country. He's from the country part of town and country, but still, sometimes it is odd. You have folks that get elected from a rural area, with ag being by far the biggest employer.
Right.
And they go up here and they almost oppose themselves.
Yeah, you know, again, that's the disappointing part of this place. But when you look at agriculture in the state, of what we've done for urban farming, what we've done to try to really bridge the gap between urban and rural, to try to make sure we have a positive impact on agriculture, and you get caught up in something like that. It's disappointing, to say the least. But look, you know, it was one of the worst years ever in agriculture. It's very difficult, you know, with everything, with inflation, with diesel prices, fertilizer prices, and on down the list, plus droughts and everything else we've been dealing with. But, you know, this was a bigger issue than probably it gets the attention because it's agriculture. It won't get as much attention as other major companies in the state. But the reality, it affects the vast majority of people's lives in this state. And there's one thing I know about Missourians, and I don't care where you're from, they like to eat.
Everybody watching is going to eat lunch.
And they like to eat. So sometimes when people take a very narrow focus on that, again, I hope when they come back they'll realize, hey, that maybe wasn't the wisest decision we made.
It is interesting. I mean, if you're eco-devo, nothing bigger than agriculture.
Yeah.
If you get into talking about what actually benefits most of your majority caucus folks, it is interesting, and it doesn't always get the attention it deserves. When you leave this ag bill, you got this for 6 years now. You think this will be as controversial next time, or will this be something they treat like every other thing?
Well, I don't know. I won't be here the next time trying to get it through there. Will be the good news part of that. But I think it's probably a good thing it did happen the way it did, because it really highlighted how important agriculture was and how much of a coalition there is out there and how many people believe in this. And again, the political process, I would like to say when it comes to issues, and why we did a special session with that, is because I think people need to view is this really an issue with agriculture, or is this more divisive politics? And I think it's a good example for people back home that says, they're going to know who supported agriculture this year when everybody comes back and who didn't. And, again, there'll be accountability for that, and that's okay. That's what should happen.
Governor, if you stick around, I'd like to talk about the tax cut. Everybody's pay stub got a little heavier after
Yeah,
this.
that's great. That's great. I'll be glad to talk about that.
We'll be right back. First, go to showmissouri.com. This is Missouri one county at a time. This week, we lost a great hillbilly storyteller in Gene Oakley. Go listen to the history of Carter County and hear all about Gene's tales. They mostly involve Gene. Showmissouri.com. This is Missouri one county at a time. We'll be right back after this.
19 states have legalized marijuana. Now it's our turn, Missouri. A yes vote on Amendment 3 is a vote to help our law enforcement do their job, fighting serious crime, and create millions in new funding for veterans' health care. And Amendment 3 will clear marijuana charges from the records of nonviolent offenders. That's going to help a lot of people in this state. For our vets, for our police, for Missouri, vote yes on Amendment 3.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
My grandfather served in World War II and was a butcher. My dad worked the midnight shift at Anheuser-Busch. I'm Eric Schmidt, and these men taught me about hard work. In college, I gave tours and took out the trash at the estate Trudy Bush Valentine grew up on. As Attorney General, I've taken violent felons off the streets. As your senator, I'll fight for the forgotten men and women Joe Biden's left behind. I approve this message because it's time to take our country back.
All rise for Judge Mike Carter, Sundays on ABC 30, host of the Cowboy and Judge Show. Tune in for community advocate Judge Mike Carter and his celebrity guests as they discuss today's hot topics and big issues here at home in Missouri. Hear about the power of good from community leaders, business owners, students, charities, and tons of familiar faces. Court is in session with Judge Mike Carter on the Cowboy and Judge Show. Available at MikeCarter.com or Sundays on ABC 30.
The Cowboy Judge Show. Giddy up. Giddy up.
The best conversations happen at the kitchen table, so I'm bringing the table to you. I'm Ann Wagner. Public servants need to listen to you, not the liberal mob. People care about kitchen table issues, like the skyrocketing prices of groceries and gas. And now Biden has you paying for someone else's college loans. Let's stop their madness. I'm Ann Wagner, and I approve this message to give you a seat at the table.
Common sense conservative, Ann Wagner for Congress.
Data captured by our state-of-the-art monitors helps us pinpoint the timing and location of severe weather more accurately and respond to trouble more quickly. Ameren, Missouri's investment in smart technologies like this is one way we're improving reliability and restoring power faster than ever. Responding to trouble before trouble hits. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. We're at the state capitol. Joined with Governor Mike Parson. Governor, thank you for sticking with us.
No, I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the second part.
So you had the first part went well. The second part, I don't know how you could complain. You came out with a tax cut. You said you was going to be the biggest one in Missouri history, and you came out with the biggest tax cut in Missouri history. What's this going to mean to, maybe an old farmer from Wheatland or a guy from West Plains that owns a gun store? What's it going to mean for them?
Well, it's going to mean a lot of things for a lot of people, but the bottom line is you're putting money in everyday people's pockets. And I don't think you get a chance to do that very often in this arena. You know, it's just the way politics works sometimes. We always seem like we want to get more and more money in here, and we never return it when we have the opportunity to return it. But it was a unique opportunity because of some of the things we put in place. With the economy, we kept our businesses open. We tried to keep people in the workforce. We tried to take a common sense approach to some of our worst times dealing with the pandemic. And really it paid off for us. And our economy is going very well. Revenue's up or in the state level. And then all of a sudden that you just feel like, how do we really do something meaningful for people permanently that will really make a difference? And you know, for me, coming from my background where I'm coming, look, this is going to cost about $765 million to be able to do this. And that's a lot of money no matter who you're talking about. But here's what I'll tell you. When you put that out to the people of the state of Missouri, you know one thing. Missourians are going to take that money. It's going to be more money in their pocket, but they're going to spend that money. So they're literally going to help the economy again by putting that money in their pockets, which was their money to start off with. So in the beginning, since I've been governor, this will be about the third time that we've cut income taxes. So this will almost be an 18% total cut since I become office when you put them all together. And to be able to do this and really, again, meaningful tax cut that people are actually going to get to see a decent dollar amount come January, and to implement in January is one of the plans we had also.
I've never really met an old boy that got his pay stub and thought, I didn't send enough money to the government. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, tell me this, when you came out with a dollar figure the state could afford, the way the process works in Missouri is the legislature can appropriate all kinds of money. The governor's stuck with holding it if it's not there.
Right.
Did they stick to, can the state afford this tax cut?
Most certainly. Most certainly. You know, and a lot of the media outlets tried to put the spin on, oh, this is like Kansas, you're going to be bankrupt, or we're going to have all these problems. This has absolutely nothing to do with Kansas. Again, we have analyzed this for months upon months to make sure what is that amount we could afford, sustain, and how can we keep it going. I just didn't want to do a tax cut, then all of a sudden 3 years later, somebody after me has to come in here and cut things. That wasn't the plan at all. We knew with wages growing the way they were in the state of Missouri, with just incomes going up, that was going to be something that was going to continue to climb, which was going to put more money in general revenue. So amongst other things that we looked at, but really there was just people back in the workforce, people drawing a little bit more money, and we can afford to do it. Look, we've taken the highest investments, the largest investments ever in healthcare, education, childcare, infrastructure, workforce in our state's history, that we've been able to do all of those programs. And I say that, Scott, with general revenue. And then everybody would say, well, it's the federal money, it's federal money. It has nothing to do with federal money. We didn't even take that into account. Only what we were doing in the state. Because I don't want to be a one and done governor. You know, I really work hard when we build a foundation. When I talk about foundations, you know, for most of our world, when you build a foundation, you're planning on building something on it.
So you're confident. When you first got elected here, there was a big discussion about Medicaid cuts. State had to cut back on Medicaid.
Right.
Then Governor Nixon ran on maintaining that AAA bond rating. He was going to restore those, but he never restored them. But he kept that bond rating. Are you confident you'll hand this off to your successor with Missouri's credit rating?
Well, yes, I am. The AAA bond rating, we've really kind of emphasized on that. Now, how many people's on the rolls is a big worry when it comes to Medicaid. And I'll tell you that as quick as I can, but under the federal declaration, you had to bring people back onto the rolls that we had done, taken off earlier, and we've added more people on there. So when I first became governor, there's 1.2 million people in the state of Missouri that was on some sort of assistance, state assistance. We got that number down to a little less than 900,000. Took a lot of flack from it, from the media, that I was kicking people off and everything. All we simply did was just call people and say, we want to verify, do you belong on this program? So,
you think any old boy's paying taxes mind you call and check on that? I don't reckon they do.
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. So COVID-19 comes, federal disaster, we cut the states off, federal disaster declaration comes in, that number's now back up to 1.4. So when you look at close to 25% of our total population of 6 million people are drawing some aid. We have got to be able to go back in there, clean that up, and put people back in the workforce. Look, we all want to help somebody that can't get back on their feet, can't get back in the workforce for multiple reasons, but we got way too many people taking advantage of the system, and we got to clean it up.
Let's talk about, you mentioned building a foundation, rural broadband. I ask you about it every time I talk to you.
Right.
I guess some of this money starts getting spent in the fall?
I hope so. I hope some of us get spent in Bolivar, Missouri is what I hope. But anyhow, no. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of money being spent. You know, we're working with a lot of communication companies, that do this business, especially the subcontractors and everything. And there's a lot of money on the table. But we really got to make sure that they're getting the job done, too. If they're making these contracts and we're signing them up, we got to make sure they're getting down to those counties that's probably never been exposed to having high-speed internet. And how do we get them there? And as I like to say a lot of times when I'm talking, back in the 30s and 40s when we were trying to figure out electricity, and how you're going to get that in rural areas across the state, look at us where we're at today. We don't think anything about going into a house and flipping a light switch off and having good electricity. Same thing we should do with broadband. Nobody should have an advantage whether you live in Carter County, as you mentioned there, or Polk County or Lafayette County. We all should come to expect those things in societies today.
Election coming up about a week and a half from now.
Yeah.
You picked out your U.S. Senate candidate yet?
I pretty well got an idea where I'm going with that one. He's a guy I picked for this job across the street. Yeah, you know what? People ask you those things sometimes, and I think of, I've been so fortunate to pick a really good team of people that's in public service. That's never been done before, a statewide election official. I picked 3 of them when I first became governor. That never been done before, and I'll pick 2 more now for the second time.
Had to feel nice when they were all reelected overwhelmingly. People affirmed those picks.
It feels good. I remember talking to all of them early on, it says, and some of them I haven't always agreed eye to eye with, but I knew there's good workers. I know they work hard. And if you're going to be in statewide office, I want you to come. Number one, I want you to put people in Missouri first, and I want you to work. If you don't want to work and you want to be lazy, then you're probably not my kind of guy I want to pick.
Looks like if you're picked for Senate, Eric Schmidt does move up, go to the United States Senate, you'll be hiring a new Attorney General. What do you look at when you look at somebody? I mean, I think the folks have pretty well, if they elect in the U.S. Senate, that's another affirmation on your pick. What do you look at in the next person?
Well, honestly, it's not my decision to make, but I'd like to have somebody in the Attorney General's office for a little while, where they're not running for the next step, would be kind of nice. So, I'll look at longevity on that, and then just find somebody that kind of got the values that we have, and again, go over there and work hard. I mean, that's a big agency, a lot of people, and, if you're going to do these jobs, you got to spend time in here. You got to make sure you're out there talking to the general public. You got to understand what they're feeling. And you just got to work hard. And I mean, there's nothing going to replace good old-fashioned common sense and a work ethic. And I'm going to be looking at people like that. I don't care where they were in class and all that kind of stuff. I just want to know, are you willing to go over there and do the job, and you're going to represent Missourians?
When I first interviewed you at the State Fair after you become governor, you talked about putting your head down and doing the job.
Right.
Is that what you're looking for in the next head lawyer of the state?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And, everybody has their different visions of what an attorney should look like and all of this. So that's going to be a lengthy discussion for a whole new show sometime. But the reality is, that's exactly what I want. I want somebody that believes in this country, believes in the fundamental things such as the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. And I want them to follow that. I want them to do the right thing. Whether they're popular or not, I don't care about that. I just want to make sure people are treated equally and fairly, and that they uphold the laws of this state.
I'm not trying to jump ahead 10 days, but do you have a person or two in your mind that you're thinking maybe might fit that role?
I don't think there's any question. There's a short list that's already out there. So I think, again, what I've told everybody, and I'll say it again, until after the election, we're not going to make any moves on anything, So I would say shortly thereafter, we'll start trying to kind of funnel through that. But, we have a short list. We kind of know, people that's been come across my career that I know and I've seen. And there's some good people out there that, I'm telling you, we're going to have an opportunity to have a really good Attorney General. There's just a lot of good people out there that I know of.
Interesting. Roy Blunt started in local government with the state government, U.S. Senate. Eric Schmidt started in local government at Glendale. Now they go to the U.S. Senate. You've started in local government. It does give you an ability to meet a lot of folks and size them up and kind of know. You get to know a lot more folks than if you just come in and run one office. If you come up through the ranks, you do get exposed to a lot of folks, get to compare styles.
Yeah, and I think you have by doing that, you also have an idea what it's like to be a statewide leader, you know, or through the election process. And being the sheriff, getting elected sheriff was probably the biggest election I ever had. Now, here I sit in front of you being governor, and believe me, I'm humbled every day to be the governor. But I always say why that first election was so important to me. It's the people that knew you the best. Yeah. These are the people you went to the grocery store with, your kids played ball with, you went to church together, you were in that same community, and they trusted you to give you their vote to be the sheriff of the county. That election has always meant a great deal to me, that people back then, when I was a young guy and unknown, says, hey, you know, I think you'd make a pretty good sheriff. And as you go through the ranks, you realize it's very hard to stay in touch with the everyday people, and you've got to work at that too. So when somebody's going to get in this arena, if they're statewide, it's one thing to get in the office and hold the title, but you still got to have contact with people. I mean, I don't want an attorney general who's going to sit over there every day in the office and make legal decisions. I want an attorney general who's going to do his job over there, but I also want him to get off his duff, go out there, meet people in the state of Missouri, and says, hey, how can we maybe do a better job as attorney general?
All right, talk about Kansas City. There's a football team.
Chiefs?
A football team over there you've been a big fan of.
Yeah,
doing pretty well.
Yeah, 5-2. You kidding me?
There's a baseball.
Played the toughest schedule in the NFL.
It has been tough. It's been fun games, but tough schedule.
Yeah.
There's a group across the parking lot, the Royals, talking about moving downtown.
Yeah.
Is that something you can tackle while you're in this office?
You will see. That's a lot of moving parts to that, but that process will start when I'm governor. So yeah, we'll be having conversations about that. I think it's I'm one of those people. It's always good to look at things to see what's the best for the state, what's best for the teams, and what's best for the fans. You know, we're just so fortunate in the state to be just a great sports state.
Let me ask you one question though. You most pro-life governor ever. Now abortion's illegal in Missouri. Taxes have been cut a substantial amount, maybe more than any other governor in history.
Right.
You've got an ag bill done.
Right.
What motivates you now? What's next?
Yeah. You know what? We were talking today about that a little bit. You know, most of the things we started out to get accomplished, we have. You know, we've been protectors of the life. We've been protecting the Second Amendment. We've been protecting the largest tax cut, workforce development, infrastructure. A lot of things we set out to do 4.5 years ago. We're well down the road accomplishing all those things. I think right now one thing we want to do is, I've told my staff, is hey, let's start seeing what we do have out there on the table and let's finish it. Let's make sure we do it right. Let's make sure we're accountable to all this stuff. We got a lot of moving parts out there right now. So I think right now that's one of the things we're going to focus on this year. Not so much new ideas, just try to just maintain what we're doing because it's working. Yeah. So if it's not broke, don't break it.
Governor, as you do that, I hope you'll come back on This Week in Missouri Politics and talk about it.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
We'll see you next week for our pre-election special. Stay tuned on ABC 30 for the Cowboy and Judge show coming up this morning. We'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, and Sterling Bank.